This is for educational use only. Our group has allowed our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material.
Hello everyone, I am Deck Cadet Delmar and we are the Group 2 presenters. So the introduction. The topic discussed the criteria for categorizing emerging political belief systems as ideologies. It mentions the work of various theorists such as Terry Eagleton. Terry Eagleton insists that full-blown thought systems typically contain 6 meanings. Goran Thurburn defines them in terms of 3 fundamental modes of interpellation. John Van Dyck emphasizes their comprehensive cognitive functions. John Thompson associates mature ideologies with 5 operational modes. Michael Frieden suggest that mature ideologies display unique factors anchored in distinct conceptual morphologies. They have proposed different criteria and characteristics to distinguish thin additional clusters from thick ideologies. This topic suggests that mature ideologies display unique features, respond to a broad range of political issues, and produce effective conceptual decontestation chains. It also emphasizes the importance of effective decontestation in forming thought systems. Decontestation is seen as a process that specifies the meanings of core concepts and arrange them in a meaningful way to facilitate collective decision making. These ideological claims, represented as semantic chains, convey authoritative meanings and have both semantic and political roles. They translate control over political language into political power.
Claim 1. Globalization is about the liberalization and global integration of markets. Market plays an important role in 2 established ideologies, liberalism and conservation. Liberalism is a belief of freedom, equality, democracy, and human rights. It is the willingness to respect and accept behavior or opinions different from one's own openness. Conservatism, on the other hand, is the commitment to tradition, values, and culture. In Claim 1, the definition of globalization is established in order to provide a definition based on the beneficiary of the mass. Globalization is about the triumph between the markets over the government. Free market capitalism is the basic concept of globalization. The more you let markets control, and the more you allow competition in your economy, the more efficient it will be. So simply said, globalization is the development of free capitalism over the entire world.
I'm here to continue discussing about the first core claim of globalism, which tackles globalization is about the liberation and global integration of markets. So it discusses how globalists like Friedman emphasize the close relationship between globalization and the market to portray globalization primarily as an economic phenomenon. They argue that the liberation of markets from state control is beneficial and often view democratic market control as harmful interference. The concept of integrating market is presented as universal imperative promoting liberty. However, this questions the compatibility of imposing a single economic strategy on all countries with the goal of spreading freedom and openness. It suggests that this ideological effort may be more about shaping the world according to globalist belief rather than a natural connection between globalization and market expansion. So This raises important points about the ideological framing of globalization and its association with market liberalization. It highlights the potential tension between promoting one-size-fits-all economic strategy and the principles of freedom and choice. It also questions of globalist control over language and political power. That this also encourage critical thinking about motivations and consequences of globalization, urging readers to consider whether it is genuinely aligned with the values of liberty and openness or serves specific interests.
Claim 2. Globalization is inevitable and irreversible. The topic discusses the characterization of globalization as inevitable and irreversible, and examines why this deterministic view is strategically employed by globalists. It suggests that this strategy is influenced by logical and cultural constraints, aligns with certain elements of conservative ideology, serves political purposes by suppressing dissent, and demonstrates adaptability to changing circumstances, indicating ideological maturity. It delves into why some proponents of globalization use these terms to describe the phenomenon. The topic explores various aspects of these characterizations, including its philosophical and ideological implications, its strategic use in shaping public perception and policy, and its adaptability in response to changing world events. Essentially, it examines the rhetoric and reasoning behind presenting globalization as unstoppable and irreversible force in our modern world. So, the rhetoric and reasoning behind characterizing globalization as inevitable and irreversible, here's our more detailed breakdown. Rhetorical use. Proponents of globalization often use terms like inevitable and irreversible to emphasize the idea that globalization is an unstoppable and natural process, much like the forces of nature. This rhetorical choice aims to create a sense of inevitability and discourage resistance or dissent against globalization. Philosophical implications. The philosophical implication of this characterization, it suggests that by presenting globalization as predetermined and beyond human control, it aligns with certain elements of conservative ideology that emphasize a natural order and organic change independent of human will. Strategical political tool. Additionally, characterizing globalization this way can serve as a strategic political tool. By framing it as an irresistible force, proponents can argue that policies aligning with globalizations are not a matter of political choice, but rather a response to an unstoppable trend. This can make it more challenging for opposing voices to gain traction. Adaptability to change also notes that globalization's ability to adapt its rhetoric in response to significant events such as the 9/11 attacks demonstrates its flexibility as an ideology. In this case, it adapted to incorporate military and economic inevitability to suit the post-9/11 world. Overall, the topic explores how the characterization of globalization as inevitable and irreversible is used as a rhetoric and strategic tool, highlighting its philosophical roots and adaptability to changing circumstances in the world.
Claim 3. Nobody is in charge of globalization. The third mode of the contesting globalization hinges on the classical liberal concept of the self-regulating market. The semantic leak between globalization market and the adjacent idea of leaderlessness is simple. If the understood workings of the market indeed preordain a certain course of history, then globalization does not reflect the arbitrary agenda of particular social class or in group. In other words, globalists are not in charge in the sense of imposing their own political agenda on people. Rather, they merely carry out the admirable imperative a transcendental force much larger than narrow partisan interests. For example, Robert Hormats, vice chairman of Goldman Sachs International, emphasized that the great beauty of globalization is that no one is in control. The great beauty of globalization is that it's not controlled by any individual, any government, any institution. Likewise, Thomas Friedman alleged that the most basic truth about globalization is this: no one in charge. We all want to basic truth about globalization is this: no one in charge. Believe that someone is in charge and responsible. But the global marketplace today is an electronic herd of often charges, anonymous stock, bond and currency traders, and multinational investors connected by screens and networks. After 9-11, however, it became increasingly difficult for globalists to maintain this claim. While a number of corporate leaders still effectively referred to the self-regulating market, it became obvious that the survival of globalization, conceived as a liberalization and global integration of markets, depend on the political leadership of the United States, that indivisible nation wielding its power, having concealed their country. Imperial ambitions banned the soft language of market globalism during the 1990s. Many Americans globalists took after their gloves after 9-11, exposing the iron fist of an irate giant. The attacks changed the terms of dominant discourse. It enabled certain groups within globalist camp to put their geopolitical ambitions explicitly before a public shock by terrorism. Indeed, their open advocacy of American global leadership spawned raging debates over whether or not the United States actually constituted as an empire. However, the replacement of Claim 3 with a more aggressive pronouncement of global Anglo-American leadership should not be a sign of globalism ideological weakness. Rather, it reflected its ideological flexibility, growing ability to respond to a new political issues. Indeed, like a full-fledged political belief system, globalism was increasingly bearing the marks of a traditional family, broad enough to contain the more economistic variant of the 1990s, as well as more militaristic post-9-11 manifestation. Third mode of the contesting globalization hinges on the classical liberal concept of self-regulating market. The semantic link between globalization market and the adjacent idea of leaderlessness is simple. Globalists are not in charge in the sense of imposing their own political agenda on people. Robert Hormats, vice chairman of Goldman Sachs International, emphasized that the great beauty of globalization is that no one is in control, and also Thomas Friedman alleged that the most basic truth about globalization is no one in charge. Considered your country's imperial ambitions by the soft language of market globalism during the 1990s. Replacement of Claim 3 with a more aggressive pronouncement of global Anglo-American leadership should not be read as a sign of globalism and ideological weakness.
The fourth claim are also known as in the long run. This decontestation chain lies at the heart of globalism because it provides an affirmative answer to the crucial normative question of whether globalization represents a good phenomenon. The fourth claim offers a positive response to the fundamental normative question of whether globalization is a good phenomenon. This chain of reconfiguration of the internal structural features of ideology forms the basis of globalism. The adjacent idea of benefits for everyone is usually unpacked in material terms such as economic growth and its prosperity. However, when linked to globalism's peripheral concept, progress, the idea of benefits for everyone taps not only into liberalism's progressive worldview, but also draws on the powerful socialist vision of establishing an economic paradise on earth. So, in the long run, when connected to the periphery of globalism, the neighboring idea of benefits for everyone is typically explained in the terms of economic growth and prosperity. The concept of progress, which emphasizes benefits for all, draws on both liberalism's progressive worldview and the potent social dream of creating an economic paradise on earth. Item 4 represents another bold example of combining elements from seemingly incompatible ideologies under the master concept globalization. At the 1996 G7 summit, the heads of the state and government of the world's 7 most powerful industrialized nations issued a joint communique. As we can see, Claim 4 is yet another daring example of fusing ideas from ostensibly competing philosophies under the umbrella term globalization. When the 7 most powerful industrialized nations in the world publish a unified statement or an official announcement, especially one made to the media. This is in the following the 1996 G7 summit. Economic growth and progress in today's interdependent world is bound up with the process of globalization. Globalization provides great opportunities for the future, not only for our countries, but for all others too. Its many positive aspects are: it includes an unprecedented expansion of investment and trade, the opening up to the international trade of the world's most populous regions, opportunities for more developing countries to improve their standards of living, the increasingly rapid dissemination of information, technological innovation, and the proliferation of skilled jobs. These characteristics of globalization have led to a considerable expansion of wealth and prosperity in the world. Hence, we are convinced that the process of globalization is the source of hope for our future. Because of these characteristics, as a result, we are persuaded that the globalization process offers hope for the future. In addition, globalists often seek to cement their deconstitution of globalization as benefits for everyone by co-opting that powerful language of science which claims to separate fact from fiction in a neutral fashion that is solely on the basis of hard evidence. And Claim 4 added that globalists frequently try to establish their dismissal of globalization as benefits for everyone by using the persuasive language of science, which asserts to distinguish fact from fiction in a manner that is only on the basis of legitimate proof. President Bush asserted that free trade and free markets have proven their ability to lift whole societies out of poverty. So the United States will work with individual nations, entire regions, and the entire global trading community to build a world that trades in freedom and therefore grows in prosperity. Therefore, free trade and free markets have proven their ability to lift entire societies out of poverty, to create a world that trades in freedom and hence increases in prosperity. The United States decided to collaborate with specific nations, entire regions, and entire international trading community.
Claim 5. Globalization's further spread of democracy in the world. The fifth, the Constitution's since linked globalizations and market to the adjustment concept of democracy, which also plays a significant role in liberalism, conservatism, socialism. Globalists typically decontest democracy through to proximity to market and the making of economic choices. At them developed through the 1980s in a peculiar variant of conservatism. Frieden calls Thatcherism. Indeed, a careful discourse analysis of the relevant text reveals the globalists tend to treat freedom, free market, free trade, and democracy as synonymous terms. Globalization spreads democracy in a way that is precious, authoritarian, or non-democratic countries to practice liberalism by encouraging them to transfer their government control to the people of the market to benefit from globalizations and create progress. It is said, since there is conflict, a democratic country, they become prosperous because they are at peace. Globalizations encourage democratic institutions which promote democracy. As the global market relies on capital's democratic values, it is inevitable that organizations that reinforce these values are rewarded. They can expand into countries with other forms of government and promote these ideals.
So I'm here to give some examples of the fifth core claims, which is globalization furthers the spread of democracy in the world. The first example I'm going to discuss is the act of voting. We as an individual have the right to vote, or we have the freedom to pick our leaders for our country for a better future. Suffrage, or the right to vote, may be exercised by all citizens of one country not otherwise disqualified by law, who are at least 18 years of age and who shall have resided in a country for at least 1 year, and in the place wherein they propose to vote for at least 6 months immediately preceding the election. So it means that once we've resided or have been living in a specific country for about a year, that's when we can claim our citizenship of the country and will have the right to vote. And for the next example I'm going to give is human rights. Human rights are a set of principles concerned with equality and fairness, which means that they recognize our freedom to make choices about our lives and to develop our potential as human beings. Having human rights means about living a life free from fear, harassment, or discrimination. Human rights include the right to live in liberty, freedom, and slavery, and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, and many more. Everyone is entitled to these rights without discrimination.
Globalization requires war on terror. Globalism's political responsiveness and conceptual flexibility, it combines the idea of economic globalization with openly militaristic and nationalistic ideas associated with the American-led global war on terror. Terrorism stalls global free trade and economic growth. One of the examples of this is the 9/11 attack, which blends the concept of economic globalization with the proper foreign policy of the United States. The U.S. aggressive martial military strategy, as a result, is a response to defend globalization's achievements. There are still ongoing races of questions why the war on terror happens or is included, but that's because it helps to fight against terrorism, and terrorism has become a global phenomenon as a result of advancement, technological developments, communication, and accessibility of transportation. The greatest method to reduce terrorism is to employ international law with a proper organization in order to build international collaboration. Since 9/11, public attention has shifted from globalization to the war on terrorism. This raises the question what agendas shape the ongoing war on terrorism and how it affects contemporary globalization. It's important to note that the relationship between globalization and the war on terror is a topic of debate and analysis among scholars and experts. Different perspectives exist, and it's crucial to consider multiple viewpoints when discussing this complex issue. So, does globalization really require war on terror? Globalization does not inherently require a war on terror. Globalization is a complex phenomenon that involves various economic, social, and political processes aimed at increasing global interconnectedness. While globalization can have both positive and negative impacts, it is not directly linked to the need for a war on terror. So, now we're talking about impact. So, how has globalization impacted the rise of the war on terror and its strategies? So, globalization has facilitated the transnational nature of terrorist activities. Advancement in communication, transportation, and financial system have made it easier for terrorist groups to coordinate across borders, recruit globally, and obtain resources. The interconnectedness of the world has allowed extremist ideologies and propaganda to spread more widely, posing new challenges for counterterrorism efforts.